go. Welcome to the Health First Group podcast, and today we have Kenan with us. So, hello, Kenan.
Hello, how's it going, guys?
Yeah, not too bad. How's your day been so far? You were just telling me it was a hectic Friday.
Yeah, it feels like my second Monday of the week, so it feels absolutely great.
Busy day. So, Kenan's one of our physios who currently works in Albany in WA. You were in Kalgoorlie for some time as well. You've probably, how long have you been working for Health First Group now, Kenan? It'd be nearly 3 years.
Yeah, August this year would be, or end of August would be, I think, 4 years.
4 years.
Yep.
There we go. Part of the furniture.
I'm part of the furniture. I'm like a dinosaur.
So, do you want to tell us a little bit about you, Kenan, your sort of career before Health First Group, and obviously your journey to Australia, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so we've had, we did our community service in Kuruman. That's where I met Sam, and it's like a Kalgoorlie, but not. It's also a red dirt mining town. We had like a hospital based physio practice there in the hospital working for the government. We did lots of inpatients, lots of outpatients, and it's the one town in South Africa where people still drive donkey carts to kind of get around. So we saw heaps of pelvis fractures and lots of orthopedic conditions because people would fall off the donkey cart literally and break their pelvis. So we got really good at doing pelvic fractures and coccyx fractures and hip fractures. That was like a really, really common thing that we treated there. And then after Kuruman, we ended up going back down to Cape Town, spent a bit of time with the family there. We started working a few hospital jobs, a few private practice jobs, excuse me. And we ended up going to opening up our own practice at one point as well, which was really good. And but we started having a family, and then we started kind of moving away from our own practice and rather just work for someone who's easier with the kids. Yeah. And that's kind of stuck with us. We still have the kids. We kind of like just kind of coming to work and then going home, and it gives us a bit more predictability in terms of planning for the kids. So we like the predictability.
It's good to hear you didn't lose the kids along the way.
No, the kids came with us. That was good.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we were thinking about Australia was a better life for our kids. In South Africa, it matters what you do, it matters where you go, and it matters what you study. In Australia, no one really cares what you do, and I like that for my daughters. It gives them a really good future.
I agree. There's a lot of opportunity in Australia, and obviously South Africa is a very different country to England, but there is definitely a lot of opportunity, and you can do anything here, whether you've got qualifications or not. You can kind of make a good go. But I found that out pretty quickly, and we obviously never left. So, does every physio in South Africa have to do community service when they graduate? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's definitely you do your 4-year study, and then you do your year of community service, and then you're a qualified physio.
Yeah, and the community service is like government hospital-based stuff. Is it like a bit of everything? Like, are you a bit of a generalist, or do you do like private patients, or how does it work?
Yeah, so it's a bit of like a general hospital, but you also do community visits. So you service the communities that are hard to reach. So you'd often spend 4 or 5 hours traveling to a remote location, set up a date with the clinic there, treat the patients on that one day, and then drive home again. Yeah. And then if you weren't doing the community visits, you're in the hospital treating the fractures and the ward rounds. But it was also very tricky because it was not a set thing that came to the door. Whatever was happening in the community at that point, that's what would reflect in the hospital. Yeah. So there was one point when the one GP practice closed, and a lot of people had a lot of high blood pressure. Then we had a lot of strokes in the hospital. Yeah, right. So it often reflects what's going on in the community. There was also another phase where the pediatrician and the obstetrician kind of went on leave for a little bit, and then we had heaps of pregnant ladies in the hospital with all sorts of pains from pregnancy, and then we did a lot of pregnancy in the hospital. But it all depended on what was happening in the town. That's what reflected in the hospital.
Yeah, right. And if people stay in South Africa, what happens then? Do people generally go into private practice or hospital or mixture, or how would it have worked if you'd have stayed there?
If we stayed in the government setting, you'd get an okay salary, I suppose, but you won't get much experience. It would be limited to just the government patients and whatever the doctor presents. In private practice, people would generally switch over. You get a bit more money in South Africa.
Yep.
And in South Africa, the money's all attached to the private hospitals. Yep. So you'd often have like your private practice that you'd be working for, then you'd locum for the hospital on the weekend.
Yeah, okay. Yep. And is it like you obviously, and we'll get onto this in a moment, you generally specialize a bit more in like pediatrics. And is there plenty of opportunity to do that? Is that like, did you come here with that expertise? Like, is there lots of courses and things over there? Is there a good opportunity to learn? And, you know, do you have those sort of professional development opportunities as well?
Yep. So I think a lot of what I've kind of taken with from South Africa to Australia is from undergrad level.
Yep.
I got 6 or 7 peds blocks on my rotation. So I got heaps of peds blocks. Everyone else got 1, but I loved it. I got 6 or 7 blocks, absolutely loved every block. And in terms of courses, it would be a lot of BOBAth based, neurodevelopmental type courses that we would go on. Yep. And I think that's probably where the base of the training came from is undergrad exposure to the different peds blocks.
Yeah, good. And people that don't know, lots of people refer to you as a wizard, a pediatric wizard, Kenan, which I think you quite enjoy that.
I do.
we had that written a few times on a review, I think, and it's kind of stuck. So, so what do you do differently, do you feel, from a pediatric perspective than the average physio or the average pediatric physio? Because you're probably, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast, but you're very popular with your clients. When you changed from Kalgoorlie to Albany, lots of clients wanted to stay on from a telehealth perspective. So, you know, I get the impression you do things a little bit differently. So, you know, how do you describe what you do versus the average physio from a pediatric perspective?
Sure. That's a very good question. I would say it's very different. My approach is completely different to a standardized pediatric assessment. Standardized pediatric assessment, you'd be looking for, you know, developmental milestones. What I tend to do is try to figure out who this person is and what is their potential. I adopt a potential-based approach opposed to a problem-based approach. A problem-based approach, let's say they've got hip dysplasia, you only see the hip dysplasia. If you take a solutions-based approach or potentials-based approach, you see a lot more than just the hip dysplasia. And I tend to take a solutions-based or a potential-based approach because it opens up so much more for my patient. I can do so much more with them. I can take them from just a hip dysplasia patient to someone who's also now talking, someone who's also confident to speak, someone who can run and someone who can jump, someone who can interact with their friends, someone who can, you know, pick a particular sport and become great at it. And I think that's probably one of the big differences. I try not to just look at the diagnosis. I look at the person.
So how does that differ in your assessment? So you'd obviously take a bit more of a holistic sort of approach in regards to your assessment, as opposed to someone's got hip dysplasia, I assess their hips. Yeah. Are you generally just taking a far more functional approach and sort of looking at everything in your initial assessment, or how do you sort of operate that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Functional movements would be absolutely key. So I've kind of gone away from milestones and gone to kind of functional movements. What can this person do? What can't they do? And what do I need to do to help them to do it? And that often I find is a lot more beneficial. But I also try to put that function in a context. So let's say they've got hip dysplasia. Are they in a wheelchair? Are they being carried by the mom, or are they like hobbling along on the hip because it's so sore? So I try to take that hip dysplasia with the functional movements into a context, and I try to teach the family how to deal with it better. So often when a patient walks in the room, I don't just have the hip dysplasia patient, I've also got the mom or the caregiver in the room as well.
Yeah.
So my treatments generally involved a high level of education to the caregiver, to the mom, but also equipping them with skills. If I'm not there, they can do it themselves. They can do it at home. And I'm a firm believer of getting everyone involved, not just me.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? You're not just treating the client, you're sort of treating the family. Like they're all a part of the equation. And you're right. Like you don't really need them to get a result in the clinic with you. You need them to get a result at home with their mum or the dad or whoever the caregiver is. So I guess including them as part of the rehab is super important.
And that's probably where I get the best results. If you can equip the parent or the caregiver to do this at home, the results are not just kind of weekly based, the results are daily based. And I really find that goes a long way in reaching those goals, smashing those goals, getting a new set of goals. And my patients go from just a patient to a confident human being who's not scared of moving or not scared of dislocating the hip. And I think that's really key, because the parent is the one that has to do it every day.
Yep.
And often I find the parent is just as scared, just as kind of, oh, what's going to happen to my daughter, just as worried as the patient is. But often if the parents are on the same page as you and the patient, everyone's on the same page, all of a sudden the patient gets really good results because everyone's working at the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So if people that are interested in and I guess, well, first question, when did you start to adopt that approach? Like, have you always done that? Or is that something that you've sort of developed over time? And, like, how did you sort of come to that conclusion and start to get those results?
Yeah, good question. So I think it comes from a bit of my background as well. I am dyslexic. I struggle to read and write. My spelling is absolutely atrocious. Yep. But one of the things that I can do really well is patterns, and pain is a pattern, stiffness is a pattern, movement is a pattern, even fear, it's all patterns. So what I've done is I've taken a lot of my own disability, and I know how that feels, and I try to stay away from things that would make me feel terrible. So if you told me that I can't spell, I already know that. So I try not to highlight the problem, I try to highlight the strength, and that's kind of been developed over the last maybe 10, 11 years.
Yep.
And I've gotten really good at listening to my patient. Listening to my patient in terms of how they speak or what they don't say. So lots of psychology in the actual treatment as well.
Yep.
In terms of where they're at, where I'm at, where the mom's at. But the biggest part that I'd say there is I know exactly how it feels to live with a disability. And the biggest thing that I'd say there is to actually not just listen to your patient, but really care for them. To really care for your patient means you got to put your opinion aside. You got to really listen to what they're saying, but don't just try to solve the problem. Try to really listen to what they want. And if you can work out what they want, it's easy to treat. If you can work out that the parent just wants the kid to say mama, or if the parent wants the kid to just walk and play with the other kids, that's a great goal. Yeah. If you don't spend that time to actually find out what they actually want, you're going to miss it. You'll miss the mark every single time.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think physios probably quite often, they're quite good at formulating a problem list for their client. But as you say, is that their problem list? Or is that what you've assessed is kind of their problem list? Yeah. And we also, formulate goals, but again, is that their goals, or are they the goals that we've sort of formulated off of their problem list, which is, they're weak in their quads, and therefore the goal is to strengthen the quads. But do they care about that, or do they just want to stand up?
And that's literally at the heart of what I do. It's not about what I see in them; it's about what they really want. And if you can help them along that goal, therapy is easy.
Yeah, good. I remember your quote. We asked everybody for a quote many years ago to go on their profile, and yours was a Richard Branson quote. Is that right? Do you want to share it with us?
Yeah, it still is. We've got to remember the quote now. My dyslexia is an advantage. I don't see it as a disadvantage. I see this as an advantage. I can see things from a different perspective that other people can't see. And I really use my dyslexia every day, and it's it does give me an edge over everyone else.
Yeah, good. So let's say a new physio, somebody's new to their physio career. They've been physio for 1 year, 2 years, and they feel that they want to go down the PEDS route in terms of specialising in that. You mentioned sort of bow bath as well. So, like, what would you say they should do first? Like, what are the good courses, or where would you good courses, resources? What would you suggest?
Difficult to say from Australia side, but from South Africa side, definitely bow bath. If you can do anything bow bath based, that would be fantastic. It gives you a good platform of neuroanatomy, neuroplasticity. It gives you a good idea of functional movements and patterns.
Yep.
So anything bow bath is 100% recommended. That's a great way to start. And I often find a lot of my techniques are based on the bow bath and maybe tweaked a little bit to suit the patient.
Yeah.
But definitely bow bath based.
Yeah,
Australia-wide, it's slightly different. Australian kind of neurophysios tend to do more exercise rehab with their patients, where I tend to take a slightly different approach on the exercise. I don't make the exercise the functional goal. I make the exercise part of the goal. So the exercise is just the means to get to the goal, but it's not my actual goal. My goal is not to strengthen them, like you're saying earlier, if it's hip dysplasia. My goal is not to strengthen them. My goal is to let them achieve their goal. And that's the part with NDIS as well. It's all their goals based. So if you look at their plan, you'll see their goals laid out in black and white there. But then if you just go one step further and ask them, is there anything else that you want to add to that list? And you'll often be surprised what they actually add. They haven't had an opportunity to tell the plan manager that they want to actually learn how to swim or, ride a bicycle. And those are small goals, but if you can get the small goal and win, in terms of qualifications, you don't actually need to be very qualified in terms of treating someone in the PEDS area. You just need to learn how to interact with them and listen. That would probably be the two biggest things above the qualifications.
So that nicely leads me into my next question, actually, which was, you do a lot of work in the NDIS sphere, and we had on our sort of local intranet, we had a question about building a rapport with clients, especially building rapport with NDIS clients with disabilities who, for a lot of them, they're sort of out of their comfort zone coming to a clinic. You're not in their home environment. They don't know you, you don't know them. And it's quite a sort of a confronting sort of, for them to see a medical professional can be quite a confronting and daunting sort of prospect. So what's your advice there in regards to ways to generate a good rapport with a client? The advice which I always give is try and find out as much as possible about the client and the parent and the carer before the session, so that you've already got a bit of a head start. You can kind of talk about what they're interested in straight away. But you came up with some really good sort of bits of advice. So what's your sort of take on that whole process?
Yeah, definitely before the patient actually comes to the session, having a bit of a background, who the carer is, who the granny is, who the grandpa is, who's the people in this person's life. That's a good starting point of conversations. So knowing who those people are, who the carers are, are you with granny for the weekend, then you're with mum for the week, or, knowing that setup is extremely helpful. It sets up a platform for you to ask questions about that person that they love, that they care for, or that cares for them. And I often find if you go away from asking the physio questions and you're asking the personal human questions, they tend to open up a lot more. But on a practical note, when you meet someone for the first time, one of the very practical things, you've got a 7-second window to make an impression on this person to show them that you're actually going to listen. If you miss that window period, anything you do after that, they're not interested. You didn't pay them the attention in the first little bit. It's not going to work. So one of the techniques that I do is I let them come in. I go in the room first. I open the door. I let them go in. I put every piece of paper down and I sit opposite them. I leave the pen, I leave the paper, and I just sit opposite them and I say, so tell me your story. And it's a good way to put it because everyone has a story. And if you give them that platform to, talk about their story, it changes how they interact with you. And that would be for like your teenager going upwards. If you had a kid, I would ditch the chair, I would sit down on the floor, cross my legs, and go lower than them. As soon as you make yourself lower than the pediatric patient, they automatically will listen to you and make eye contact with you. With my autistic kids, I tend to use a whisper. So if I was doing an assessment and meeting them for the first time, it would sound something like this. Tell me your story. What can you tell me? And it would be at a very soft whisper, and it just invites their ears. Oh, he's really making time for me.
Yep.
And I find that I call it the being human rule first. So leave physio at the door, just be human first. You can do the physio part after that, but just connect with that patient. Take a couple of moments and really just connect with them. Get down to the level. If you need to change your voice and make it soft, make it soft. If you open up a platform to talk about them, great platform. Don't talk about yourself. Let them talk about themselves. That's a great entry point. And often I would find out, like if it's an autistic kid and they like a particular video game, I will talk about that video game at length.
Yeah.
So part of it is kind of knowing what they're talking about. And if you don't know, it's a perfect opportunity to say, oh, can you tell me more about that? And it really just sets the conversation. They're talking about something that they love. They're super confident in it. They're super this is something that they love. They'll talk about it to the nth degree. And that literally happens within the first 2 minutes of the meeting. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of NDIS patients I've seen in the past, they bounce around a little bit until they find someone they like to see. And they may come in for an assessment and they may not come back. They may say, oh, I've seen 3 other physios and it didn't work. But as you say, I imagine the vast majority of physios they'll be straight in with the physio questions. What can't you do? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Whereas like your approach is get to know them first. You've got a bit more time with them during that NDIS assessment. Spend the first 20, 30 minutes just winning them over and getting to know them and then getting to know you. Because that's what the feedback we've had about you is that the clients, they love seeing you and they don't want to see another physio. So for example, when you change locations, it was a big deal because they didn't want to see anybody else. And that's because you've created that sort of human bond with them. As opposed to you being their physio, they kind of probably enjoy coming to see you and they like coming to see you as opposed to getting dragged to physio every week because they feel they have to be there.
Yeah, and to paint the context, a lot of the NDIS patients have received just exercise rehab. They go to the gym, they cycle, or they do the reformer, or they just do exercise. But exercise is not personal. Exercise is not personal at all. And I often find I get the patients that are very unwilling to actually exercise. And often what you have to do with your treatment is be completely creative. And I'll give you an example. I've got a 3-year-old kid that's tiptoe walking, and the mom's really concerned about, the tiptoes.
Yep. And
part of it was educating the mom that, tiptoe walking is actually normal for autistic kids. They don't like the sensations of the feet, the socks, the labels, the shoes, the sand. So that's completely normal for them. As they get a bit more sensory kind of aware, that they're a little bit more flat-footed and they can walk a little bit easier on the ground. So educated the mom to treat the kid and to teach the kid to kind of walk, flat-footed and see if they could walk flat-footed. I did about 6 to 7 weeks of just desensitization therapy on her feet. I exposed the feet to different textures. And I gave her the opportunity to say, yes, I like that, or no, I don't like that. And I mentioned on a previous post, if you have a little tick box system, so a little tick for yes or a little cross for no, and you give them the opportunity to choose. I like this one, I don't like this one. It already kind of directs your treatment to a bit more of a focused area. Okay, you don't like these sensations, we don't need these ones. We can focus on these ones. And it just makes them more comfortable because you've given them choice and they like it.
Yeah, good. It's interesting. It's a totally different approach, and like you say, you need some patient mileage to practice these techniques because, like you say, the average physio may go, there's something wrong with the calves. Let's do some soft tissue work on the calves to get some length in them.
Yeah.
Whereas your yeah, you're treating one of the symptoms, aren't you? But you're not necessarily tackling the cause whatsoever, which is the sort of sensory issue in the feet. Are you just on the NDIS? So you obviously see quite a lot of NDIS clients. So are you seeing a change there in regards to sort of funding levels and accessibility to treatment? And you've obviously been seeing NDIS clients for nearly 4 years now. So what are you seeing there?
Yeah, it's definitely changed. I think something's changed at the administration level. There used to be quite generous funding for just physio and then just for occupational therapists. So every kind of therapist had their own budget almost within the budget. Yep. In the last, I'd say probably year, they've switched from a kind of everyone has their own budget to like just a one lump sum for everyone.
Yeah.
So everyone's dipping in the same pocket. So it has affected a little bit of the treatments.
It's hard to navigate as well, then, isn't it? Because you have to have the conversation with them. What funding have you used for
OT, for speech?
Language? Yeah, and you'd rather not be having those conversations. You'd rather just be focusing on the treatment aspect of it. But it does make it a little bit more difficult to navigate from the administration side. I've noticed that.
Yeah, and one of the other things that's also kind of happened probably in more recent months is some of the patients would ask questions about why is it so expensive, and what I've come to realize is they don't actually know the processes. They think we set the rate of the NDIS, but that's actually set by NDIS and NDIA themselves. And then I'd say that's based on location. Different locations have different rates, different timeframes, so that's all set by the NDIS. But what I've come to realize is just because they have that funding, they don't necessarily understand that funding.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily understand how it's meant to be used. And so part of your job is to kind of read through the plan, but also help them use the funding correctly. Yeah. I had one patient who they spent more than, I think it was 13,000, 14,000 on OT to do fine motor control. But when I asked the patient what they really wanted to do, they really wanted to run. And I was saying, well, fine motor control is good, but it's not what you want. So we ended up using, I think there was $2,000 or $3,000 left. And then I said, so of that budget that's left, we got $2,000, $3,000. How much of that do you want me to spend actually focusing on running? And then she said all of it. She wants to use all of that budget on running. So I actually phoned the OT up and I said, hey, this is what the patient would like to do. I don't want to stop the small kind of, fine motor control that you're doing, but she definitely wants to spend a bit of money on the running. And I just told the OT, you can tell me what you want me to do for the fine motor control and I'll continue that. But you definitely have to have those conversations. And one of the questions that I ask regularly is, how much of this do you want to allocate towards this goal?
Yeah.
Do you want to spend all of it? Do you want to spend a portion of it? Yeah.
And it's probably the potentially the difference in the sort of the support coordinator being a part of that equation or not. Like some support coordinators are really good at sort of having those conversations and sort of divvying up the sort of resources as they see most appropriate with the client. And others, as you say, they kind of there's just a lump sum, 10,000 for therapy, and then it's kind of a bit of a free for all to sort of see what they actually want to do with that. And as you say, nobody's had a conversation with them. Do they want to spend that on speech and language? Is that their main issue? Is interacting with speech the main issue, or is running the main issue? In which case, using it sort of in a more appropriate way. Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
Okay, good. That was really insightful, Kenan. So really appreciate that. Do you have any questions or anything else you want to go through?
One of the other things that I was thinking about, a young physio starting out, maybe wanting to get in pediatrics, and the differences between South African physios and Australian physios. From a personal level, being dyslexic has probably helped me be more empathetic towards my patients. And that's really something that you can practice over and over and over. And I use it as a rule when the students come into my room. I use this as a rule. You don't write down anything for 7 minutes. You don't do any exercises. You don't do any opinions for 7 minutes. You just listen. And it's hard because as a new grad, you just want to write down everything. You just want to, get it down on the piece of paper. But you can remember 7 minutes. You can remember 7 minutes of conversation. And practicing that regularly, 7 minutes, when that patient walks in the room, don't touch anything else, just listen. That's going to set you off on a really different direction to what you thought you'd be going on. So
I really like that, because it is very different. That, like, as you say, the average new physio would want to write down everything, and they're almost sort of got their head in the paper, checking the questions as to what's right, to make sure they don't miss any subjective questions. But I guess your approach is have a chat with them, look them in the eye, ask the questions, and kind of build a rapport with them first before anything.
And then after that 7 minutes, then I ask my patient, can I just jot some of these things down so that I don't forget? I should just jot it down quickly, and then I'll actually reiterate it. So it gives me a chance to listen. I get a chance to just jot it down quickly, but then I get a chance to reiterate it. So I said, have I heard this correctly? Is this what you're telling me you want me to do? And often just listening and clarifying what they actually, want, I've already won them over, because they're going, oh, you really heard me. No, you're spot on. That's exactly what I want. Yeah. And if you can work out exactly what they want, anything you do after that point is going to be in line with what they want. So they're going to automatically be happier because you've listened to them. They really felt heard, but now you're actually doing something according to what they want. The satisfaction levels of those patients is extremely high.
Yeah, because why 7 minutes? Is that just you feel you can recall the amount of information during that time?
In 7 minutes, the average person in a new meeting would talk for roughly 7 minutes. So you've got a 7 minute window period. It's a bit of a psychology fact there, but 7 minutes is a rough window period where people will feel comfortable talking about themselves, and then the conversation starts dying.
Nice.
Yeah.
Any other tips for young physios?
Yes, don't be scared to go outside of the box with assessments. Sometimes I've had patients coming into the room and you can see they're so scared. It's a new environment. Sometimes I don't even go into the actual treatment room. I'll just go outside and I bounce a ball with them. Yep. Play a little bit of catch, and I call it the human factor. Don't be scared to go away from just the structured setup and go for a bit more informal setup, a bit more informal play. Let them relax. Let them see that you're still a human. And I often find that is super helpful, not only for you as a therapist, because it's going to challenge you to be creative. With NDIS, it's not a copy-paste formula. You can't do what you did for one for the next person. But what is going to be very good for you to do is develop creative ways of doing the same thing for your patient in a way that they enjoy.
Good. I love that. I think it's great advice. And as you say, that sort of, it's not a recipe, one sort of recipe fits all. Do you know what I mean? It's very much an individual approach, which a lot of people wouldn't do. And then we've never really spoken about it before, but I'm sort of, I can really see now why you build the rapport you do with the clients, because, the first part of the session is just getting to know them as a person and forget about the physio stuff and kind of build a rapport with them and win them over. And then you can sort of move on, which is really important in the NDIS sort of sphere. But to be honest, you can take that with any sort of form of private practice. Yes, it might not be for the same length of time, but your sort of tip there in regards to the assessment and just sort of sitting and listening to them for the first 5 minutes of the assessment without writing anything down, that applies to all clients. And listening and understanding what their goals are, that obviously applies to all clients as well.
And then the last part that I also say there is when we're looking at the pediatric population, you've also got to remember that your most valuable asset is the mom. The mom in any of these treatments, I teach the mom the skills. I show the mom the techniques. I give the mom encouragement of, yeah, you're doing that fantastically, well done. And I often find is if we get the patient on board, we get the mom on board, mom gets dad involved, mom gets the cousin involved, mom gets the granny involved, mom gets everyone involved in this person's rehab, and the person appreciates that. So never underestimate the power of mom, include them in the session. A lot of times I'll chat to the physio or the patient and then the mom is waiting outside in the waiting room. Include the mom in the session, get them in. The mom wants to know, she's the information network. She's the one that's going to hold everything together. And typically what I find is when I change my thinking from just treating the patient to equipping the parent, it goes so much better, because now we've got two equipped people to do the same task. And that really does change a lot of things. But from the mom's the one that does the referring. So if I treat one NDIS client and I get the mom involved and I've listened to the patient and mom's happy, mom sees that you've listened to a kid. Mom also sees that you've taken the time to get to know them, but mom also sees that you're really making a difference according to what they want. That mom is your most valuable resource. The amount of referrals that I'll get from a mom is absolutely ridiculous. I probably have a waiting list when I was in Carl for a good couple of weeks just from the moms. Here in Albany as well, it's the same thing. The moms are my biggest referral network.
And we have like as you know, a friend and family referral scheme at Health First Group, and off the charts in Albany. So the number of people that are referring other people to the clinic is off the charts in comparison to any other clinic. And as you say, it's based on building a rapport, and it's best form of advertising, isn't it? You know, just make a good impression and do the job well, get results, and everything else comes, and then the patients keep flocking in to see you.
Yeah. There's one last thing just on that note. So sometimes with the NDIS patients, sometimes you have to also know when to pull back a little bit. And what I mean by that is sometimes the autistic kid or the person with a disability just needs time to just be. And to kind of adopting that mindset of you can have a bad day and it's okay. You can crack it here, it's fine. You know, and sometimes you just need to learn when to just take a step back. And I call it again the human factor. I've got my physio goals. This is what we want to do. But sometimes your patient just needs you to step back. Give them the space to just be. And once they've calmed down, once they've kind of settled down, once they've told you what's happened in the week, maybe their dog died, you know, whatever that is, and I call it the human factor, just again, it reiterates that you're really listening to them. You're not just going in with your own agenda. You're really there to help them. You're really there to serve them. And that would probably be my biggest encouragement when you get a new patient. Think of how you can serve them, not necessarily what you can do for them, just how you can serve them. Changing that little mindset of, I'm the physio, I'm going to tell you what to do, to I'm the physio, I'm going to support you the best way I can, and that's going to be serve you. If that means you need a space to cry, you can cry. If that means you need to talk about the dog that just died, you can talk about it here. And it creates this really good, safe space where they can just be themselves. And the biggest difference that I've seen with my patients is when you let them be 100% themselves, that's when you get the best results.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I like that. And that might be a case of just having a chat to them and we'll see you next week. And like you say, give them that time and not sort of forcing what you want to do during the session because you think that today they need to do their exercises, or it might just not be the day for it, and let's see you next week. And sort of allow that process to occur.
100%.
Great. Perfect, Kenan. I really appreciate that input. I know there's lots of physios in the Health First Group network that have wanted me to have a chat with you to pick your brain, and it won't be the last time. So I'd love to get you on again and have a chat, and I'll get a series of questions to pick your brain, all things pediatrics and NDIS, and we'll jump on again and have another chat. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. Perfect, mate. Thanks for your time, and stay safe over there. Enjoy the weekend in Albany. It's nearly here. Almost. Yeah, you too, Paul. Thanks, mate. Take care. All right. Cheers.